68 years old, and I was still scrubbing grease off the same cast-iron skillets I would been washing since Ronald Reagan was president. My arthritis screamed every morning when I bent down to check the pilot lights, but I did it anyway because Henderson's home cooking wouldn't run itself. For 26 years, I would serve country fried steak and apple pie to folks in Millfield, Ohio, while my 3 grown children treated my restaurant like their personal ATM. Before we start this story, hit that like button and tell me in the comments what is the most important lesson your parents taught you about hard work. I would love to hear from you. Robert, my eldest at 34, still acted like he was fresh out of high school. Daniel was 31 and engaged to Jessica, who called herself a life coach but hadn't kept a job longer than 4 months. And Sarah, 29, spent her days making lifestyle content for social media, convinced fame was one viral video away. All 3 lived in my house, ate from my pantry, and treated Henderson's home cooking like it was beneath them unless they needed spending money. Every morning at 4:30, I would drag myself out of bed to prep biscuits and gravy. My back ached constantly, but I balanced the books, paid suppliers, managed inventory, and kept that ancient furnace running. I did all this so my children could live comfortably, not because I enjoyed being a martyr, but because I believed sacrifice was what mothers did. I kept thinking someday one of them would walk into that kitchen and say, "Mom, let me help." But that day never came. Last Thursday morning, I was kneading dough before dawn. The restaurant had only 2 dinner reservations. 2. I was chopping vegetables when Robert wandered down in pajamas, carrying a protein shake. "You covering utilities this month?" he asked casually. My knife stopped. "I will manage," I replied, though my account was overdrawn by $67. He shrugged and left without offering help. After paying bills that afternoon, I had nothing left. I skipped lunch to save money. When I got home, Daniel and Jessica were planning their wedding on speakerphone. I cleared my throat. "We need to talk." They kept scrolling. "I cannot make the mortgage payment," I said firmly. Silence. Robert looked up. Daniel ended his call. Sarah appeared, holding her smoothie. Jessica spoke first. "Maybe it is time we discussed your long-term living situation." "Margaret," I blinked. "Excuse me," Robert pulled out a manila folder. "We think you should simplify, find something more manageable." "You mean move out," I said. Sarah crossed her arms. "Nobody's kicking you out, Mom. We are offering you a chance to focus on yourself instead of this old house and struggling restaurant. Focus on myself." I would work 16-hour days for her college. She would drop out junior year. Jessica chimed in like she would rehearsed. "We are happy to help you pack. This is really best for everyone." Daniel nodded, like a bobblehead. Robert slid the document over 2 weeks. Notice to vacate property. No sound came out when I opened my mouth. They looked at me like an unwelcome houseguest, like I hadn't bought every stick of furniture they sat on. The strangest part was their calmness. No guilt, no shame, just cold determination. I stood up, walked to my bedroom, locked the door, sobbed until my chest ached. The next morning, I packed my checkbook, recipe box, and grandmother's wedding ring. Dorothy picked me up an hour later. She handed me coffee and said, "It is about damn time." When I moved into Dorothy's guest room, I couldn't unpack. My belongings stayed in garbage bags. The scent of her lavender softener made me homesick, but I refused to wallow. I applied everywhere: diners, cafeterias, fast food. Most managers saw my gray hair and declined. Just experience. No formal resume. Dorothy showed me a classified ad for a Chinese restaurant needing kitchen help. Cash preferred. I showed up in my best dress, smelling like bacon grease. The owner barely looked up. "Start immediately." I washed dishes until my shoulders burned. That night, I soaked my hands in ice water and fell asleep fully dressed. The head cook, Mr. Chen, pointed at carrots and handed me a peeler. I worked in silence. On day 5, a customer asked who made the soup. Mr. Chen glanced at me but said nothing. The next day, he let me make broth again. Meanwhile, Dorothy updated me on my children. Robert had maxed out credit cards trying to refinance the restaurant. Sarah posted a video about toxic mothers that went viral for wrong reasons. Daniel and Jessica kept planning their wedding. I didn't respond to messages. They would erase me like I never existed. But something was shifting. At the Chinese restaurant, I learned new techniques. I brought leftover biscuits one morning and showed Mr. Chen my sausage gravy. He let me serve it to staff. The dishwasher asked for seconds. That evening, I walked home with $35 in tips and lightness in my chest. For the first time in months, I felt valuable, not as a mother or provider, just as someone who understood how to create comfort food. One evening, Dorothy shook her head at her phone. "They are using your recipes." There it was. An Instagram post from Henderson's featuring Sarah touring the kitchen while Jessica described their fusion menu. My pot roast, my cornbread, my apple butter. My jaw tightened, but I said nothing. Let them try running that kitchen without me. They would never survive the breakfast rush. I knew it. Soon, everyone else would too. I hadn't seen them in almost a month when I finally walked past Henderson's home cooking again. I wasn't going there intentionally. I would take in the scenic route home from the restaurant, thinking I was emotionally prepared. The lights were still functioning. The sign still hung above the entrance, like it meant something important. But the atmosphere was completely wrong. It used to smell like fresh bread and coffee. Now it reeked of scented candles and expensive perfume. The windows were covered with flyers advertising wine tastings and poetry readings. Fusion Friday and something called Wellness Wednesday brunch. My stomach turned. Inside, I could see Robert wearing a suit he couldn't afford, pacing behind the register. Sarah was posing by the hostess station while Jessica adjusted lighting for a photograph. None of them looked like they belonged in a working kitchen. I stood across the street behind a telephone pole, just observing. Nobody noticed me. I felt invisible. The next morning, Dorothy handed me an envelope that had been delivered to her address with my name written on it. No return address visible. Inside was a typed letter on Henderson's home cooking letterhead with a formal signature from Daniel. It wasn't even handwritten, just cold corporate legal language. This document serves as official acknowledgement that Margaret Henderson has relinquished her physical and financial involvement in the business known as Henderson's Home Cooking. It continued with a list of outstanding charges, including the final grocery order I would purchase before they evicted me, and even a cleaning fee related to my departure. My name was listed as former proprietor. No phone call, no warning, just a bill for having lived in my own restaurant. I laughed when I read it, not from amusement, from sheer disbelief. I would build something from nothing, taught them everything they knew about running a business, and now they were treating me like a liability they would successfully eliminated. I didn't cry. I didn't tear it up. I folded it carefully and placed it in my purse because I knew someday I would need it. That night, at the Chinese restaurant, I chopped onions until my eyes watered for real reasons. Mr. Chen didn't ask for an explanation. He just handed me a sharper knife and gestured toward the sink. That was his way of saying he understood. Over the following weeks, I started gaining recognition. Customers began requesting me specifically. "The lady who makes the amazing stew," they would say. I shared stories while they ate. Nothing dramatic. Just small moments about life, about cooking, about family. People enjoyed listening. They tipped generously. One woman asked if I provided catering services. I said, yes, even though I didn't own a car or equipment or even a complete set of pans. I figured I would solve those problems as they arose. And I did. Word traveled quickly. Mr. Chen allowed me to use his kitchen after closing time. I kept my head down, but my passion was returning. Dorothy started asking when I would open my own place. I laughed initially. Then I stopped laughing. I started calculating expenses. I asked questions. I wrote everything down. I even chose a name, Maggie's Second Chance. I didn't know if I could make it happen, but I knew one thing for certain. If my own children could erase me so easily, then I would build something so successful, so undeniably mine, that they would never forget who I was. Not ever. The idea for the food truck started like most things in my life. Quietly, stubbornly, and out of necessity. I would sketch a menu on the back of a grocery receipt at 2 in the morning, half asleep. While replaying a customer's order I would messed up earlier. It wasn't fancy comfort food sliders. Meatloaf ramen, chicken and waffle sandwiches. Dishes nobody else was attempting. Dorothy saw it on the kitchen table the next morning and declared, "You are doing this." I told her I had no money, no equipment, no permits. She replied, "You have me." We scraped together our savings, sold old jewelry, and borrowed a run-down food truck from a guy Dorothy knew through her church. I spent the next month cleaning it with vinegar and determination, trying to figure out how to make dreams work with 2 burners and a leaky roof. I didn't tell anyone, not even Mr. Chen. I worked my restaurant shifts, then stayed up late testing recipes under a flickering light in Dorothy's garage. The first day we opened Maggie's Second Chance. We parked near a construction site and sold out by noon. Word spread fast. A college student made a TikTok video about the grandma chef serving comfort food magic, and it reached 400,000 views in 3 days. We started attracting lines, long ones. Dorothy managed the cash register. I cooked like my life depended on it, because it did. Every dollar I earned went straight back into supplies, gas, ingredients, containers. I slept 4 hours a night and drank instant coffee like it was medicine. But I felt alive. For the first time since my children had pushed me out of my own home, I wasn't just surviving. I was building. People called me chef. They asked for selfies. Food bloggers appeared. One woman cried over my chicken and dumplings and said it tasted like her grandmother's recipe. I didn't cry, but I felt something shift in my chest. I even started researching other trucks, considering expansion. That is when everything collapsed. Dorothy came home one evening, with a strange expression on her face. I was reviewing receipts, calculating whether we could afford a second freezer, when she placed a folder in front of me and sat down heavily. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. My stomach dropped. She explained that she would taken out a line of credit using my name to cover the initial truck investment. She would thought it wouldn't matter if we became successful. She hadn't mentioned it because she didn't think we would qualify, but apparently we had, and now they wanted their money back. $15,000. I just sat there, no shouting, no accusations. Just numb. The next week, the lien hit the truck. We were shut down. I came home to find an orange sticker on the windshield, seized for delinquent debt. My name, my credit, my failure. I didn't speak to Dorothy for 3 days. Not because I hated her, but because I couldn't stand how much I still needed her. The evening after the seizure, I returned to the Chinese restaurant. I didn't even punch in. I just sat on the kitchen floor, leaning against the prep table like a broken piece of equipment. Mr. Chen found me there and said nothing. Just handed me a cold soda and walked away. 10 minutes later, he returned, crouched down beside me, and handed me an envelope. I opened it. Inside was $12,000 in cash. I stared at it like it might disappear. "You saved my restaurant," he said simply. "Now save yours." I tried to refuse. He held up one hand, firm. "This is not charity. This is investment. Don't waste it." I held that envelope all night. Didn't sleep, didn't cry. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Power. The money from Mr. Chen wasn't just cash. It was a lifeline, a loaded promise that I wasn't going to waste on self-pity. I used every dollar strategically because it mattered. I paid off the lien, cleared the debt, and reclaimed the truck. This time, I did everything legally: permits, licenses, insurance, no favors, no shortcuts. I designed a professional logo, hired a teenager from Dorothy's church to handle social media, and rebuilt the menu from the ground up. Maggie's Second Chance reopened in a better part of town, near an office complex and a community college. From day one, it exploded. People came from across town. Real customers, not just social media tourists. They came for the food but stayed for the experience. I remembered their names. I remembered their dietary restrictions. I added a vegetarian option because one woman came back 4 times just to ask if I would. I printed merchandise. I bought a second fryer. For the first time in my life, I had real savings. Actual savings. I started planning ahead. Franchise opportunities. Second truck. Maybe even a permanent location. I was careful. I was disciplined. Every dollar that came in, I tracked. I monitored my taxes. I managed vendors. I was doing everything correctly. So when it all crashed again, I didn't see it coming. It started with a letter from the city. My temporary health permit was under investigation. Initially, I thought it was an error. But then a second letter arrived, followed by a fine, then an anonymous complaint. A tip that I was operating a mobile kitchen with expired paperwork, even though my documents were current. I spent days chasing answers, standing in line at city offices, making phone calls, being told to wait for callbacks. Business slowed. Customers started asking why I wasn't open certain days. I told them I was doing maintenance, but really, I was fighting just to stay legal. One evening, as I was closing up, a woman I barely recognized approached me. She looked uncomfortable. Nervous, said she was a friend of Jessica's. That she would overheard a conversation at a book club. Apparently, Jessica had connections at the city planning office. She would brag about making things difficult for someone who was stealing her family's restaurant concept. I didn't respond. I just nodded and thanked her. Then, I sat in the truck, lights off, hands trembling. I realized they weren't just finished with me. They were threatened by me. My success embarrassed them, and instead of fixing their own failing business, they were trying to destroy mine. The next day, I walked into the leasing office of a rundown strip mall a few blocks from my usual route. There was an empty shell of a former bakery available. 1 bathroom, grease trap, decent plumbing, rough walls. I toured it once and said, I will take it. I used the last of my savings and the remainder of my tip money to pay the security deposit. Mr. Chen came with me to the hardware store to pick out paint. Dorothy scrubbed the floors without being asked. I didn't have enough money to hire contractors, so I learned to patch drywall from YouTube videos. We worked around the clock, ate meals sitting on milk crates, and used mismatched plates until we could afford proper dinnerware. I opened the doors to Maggie's second chance, the brick and mortar version, on a Wednesday morning, with no fanfare, no media, no grand opening. Just a handwritten open sign taped to the window and a small chalkboard menu with 6 items. By the end of that week, we had a line around the block. Local news appeared. A popular chef tweeted about the meatloaf. A well-known food critic called the chicken and waffles transcendent. I didn't celebrate, I just kept cooking. I knew better now. Success isn't the finish line, it is a target. And I had 3 children out there who still thought I was the easiest mark in town. I was about to prove them wrong, permanently. I didn't need a ribbon-cutting ceremony or fake publicity to know Maggie's second chance had succeeded. It was in the faces of customers who returned twice in 1 week. The teenagers who photographed their plates before eating. The elderly couples who sat at the corner booth and told me my food reminded them of home, even if they were from completely different backgrounds. Word of mouth accomplished what no influencer ever could. Within a month, we were profitable. In 2 months, we were booked solid days in advance. I kept the menu focused and personal. No gimmicks, no ridiculous fusion experiments. Just the dishes I would perfected through memory, late nights, and calloused hands. I hired 2 college students from Dorothy's neighborhood to help at the register, and they treated customers like friends, not transactions. I even brought in a dishwasher, a quiet man named Raymond, who didn't talk much but worked efficiently and always stayed late. My system worked, my kitchen flowed. And unlike before, this time, nobody could take it from me. The lease was in my name. The business was registered under Maggie's Second Chance LLC. I had backup copies of everything, filed quarterly reports, and checked my books nightly. I would learned too much to be careless again. And still, they came. Customers who used to eat at Henderson's home cooking. They would tell me about how the place had changed, how unwelcoming it felt now, how the food was disappointing. I would smile politely, offer them extra bread, and never mentioned my connection. Let them figure it out. I didn't need to spell out my story. It was in every bite. What I didn't expect was how quickly their downfall would unfold. It started with a viral post. Someone had visited Henderson's home cooking and posted a photo of what they called the saddest $22 chicken dinner in Ohio. A dried-out breast, a dollop of some kind of sauce, and a pink cocktail with edible flowers. The caption read, "Food by people who have never worked a real kitchen." It exploded overnight. Comments poured in. Former customers started sharing their horror stories. Cold food, long waits, rude service, overpriced drinks. I didn't laugh, I just watched. Then, a former employee posted a video on TikTok exposing what it was like to work under Robert and Jessica. The video included clips of Jessica yelling at staff, Robert sleeping in the office, and Sarah filming promotional videos during dinner rush while the kitchen fell apart. The comments were brutal. No wonder their mom left. This is what entitlement looks like. Imagine firing your own mother just to run this into the ground. That last one hit me hard, because I hadn't told anyone I was their mother. Not publicly, not online. But somehow, it had gotten out. The next day, my follower count doubled. My review page exploded with 5-star ratings from strangers calling me a legend. The real deal, the comeback queen. I kept my head down, still showed up early, mopped my own floors, chopped my own vegetables. But I wasn't naive. I knew this was my moment, and I knew they knew it too. The first time I saw Jessica in my restaurant, I almost didn't recognize her. She came in mid-afternoon, sunglasses on, phone in hand, trying to act casual. She walked around slowly, examining the layout, the flow, the staff, the small display case I used for desserts at the front. I said nothing, didn't even acknowledge her. She didn't order anything. Just left a few minutes later, her mouth tight with frustration. That same week, a food truck parked directly across from me for 4 days straight. Same color scheme, same font style, similar menu. Almost identical. Robert had bought it. He was running it himself, with a staff of 2 and speakers blaring classic rock like we were at a county fair. But customers weren't fooled. They came over, looked at both options, and always came back to me. Some laughed. One woman even said, "Nice try, copycat," before ordering 2 chicken dinners and tipping 30%. I didn't retaliate, I didn't engage, but I took photographs, documented everything, time-stamped it, filed it in a folder I labeled evidence because I knew something they didn't. I still owned part of Henderson's home cooking. They never filed a complete transfer, never bought me out legally, and officially, my name was still on the operating agreement filed with the county. A fact I would ignored for months because I didn't want to get dragged back into their chaos. But now, they were playing dirty, trying to sabotage me, so I pulled out my copies, met with a lawyer, explained everything. The forged signatures, the illegal takeover, the way they removed me without proper consent. He reviewed the documents, then said, "You have a strong case, and you have leverage." A week later, I filed an official claim notice, sent it to their landlord, their suppliers, their licensing agency. I included proof. Contracts. Even a side-by-side comparison of the menus to demonstrate intellectual property theft. Then I sent my children certified letters. The subject line: eviction, notice. I didn't expect gratitude. I expected war, but what I got instead was silence. For 4 days, nothing. Then came the calls. Robert first, naturally. 10 missed calls, a voicemail, half shouting, half pleading. "This is insane, Mom. What are you trying to do to us?" Then Jessica, cold, sharp. "We can make this very ugly, Margaret." I didn't respond. Sarah posted a tearful video about family betrayal that barely got 3,000 views before she deleted it. Meanwhile, I cooked, served, smiled, let the county do what it does best. Follow the paperwork. By the end of the week, Henderson's home cooking was shut down for operational violations, pending investigation. The locks were changed, the health permit suspended. The website went offline. The review page was flooded with permanently closed notifications. And me, I just flipped the open sign at Maggie's second chance, took a deep breath, and served a line of customers that stretched around the corner. Because the difference between them and me. I built this with burned hands, not borrowed confidence. And I wasn't finished yet. The day I walked into my lawyer's office and signed the final paperwork to reclaim control of Henderson's home cooking, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt balanced, like something that had always been broken was finally clicking back into place. We filed the documents officially, and the next morning, the county served a formal notice of business ownership reassignment. I hadn't stepped foot inside that building in almost a year, but it still smelled like me. My recipes were still on the laminated menus. The furniture I would chosen was still arranged the way I would left it. Except now, the lights were off. And the silence was louder than any argument my children had ever thrown at me. I didn't change the locks out of spite. I changed them because they no longer belonged. But I wasn't interested in revenge for revenge's sake. What I wanted was for the truth to come full circle. The day after the official repossession, I posted a statement on my restaurant's social media. No drama, no accusations, just a simple photo of me in my apron, holding a receipt from the very first month I opened the business 26 years ago. The caption read, "I built this with $87 in my bank account. No loans, no partners, just recipes and determination. Sometimes you have to lose everything to remember why you started." The internet did the rest. Food bloggers reposted it, local news requested interviews. Even a few chefs I would never met reposted it with comments, like respect. I wasn't interested in going viral, but it happened anyway. And then, 4 days later, they came. Not a phone call, not a letter. They walked through the door of Maggie's second chance one by one, like ghosts. Robert first, shoulders hunched, face puffy like he hadn't slept. Then Daniel and Sarah, trailing behind him, both quiet, not dressed for confrontation. I was restocking the dessert display when I saw them. I didn't flinch, I didn't greet them. I kept doing what I was doing until Robert cleared his throat and said, "Can we talk?" I turned slowly, leaned against the counter, and asked, "Are you here to order?" He blinked. "No, we were hoping." I cut him off. "Then you are blocking my line. People have real business to conduct." A customer behind them chuckled and stepped forward. They moved aside. Robert tried again. "We messed up, okay? We know we did. But you cannot just destroy us like this." Sarah was crying silently, makeup already smudging. Daniel stared at the floor. I looked at them the way you look at strangers. In an elevator, civil, detached, unconcerned. "You didn't mess up," I said. "You made choices. You signed documents. You filed paperwork. You lied. You replaced me. That is not a mistake. That is a strategy. And you executed it perfectly. Now so have I." Daniel spoke then. "For the first time in months, is there anything we can do to make this right?" His voice cracked slightly. I didn't soften. "There is work if you want it," I said. "Back of house. Minimum wage. No title, no special treatment, no family discount. You show up, you work, you follow orders, just like I did for 26 years while you watched." Robert looked like he wanted to explode. Sarah shook her head like she couldn't believe what I was saying. Jessica wasn't with them. I had a feeling she never would be. "You are serious?" Robert asked. "Dead serious," I said. "The aprons are in the back. Timesheets are on the refrigerator. If you are not here 15 minutes early, you are late." Then I turned back to the register and took the next order. They didn't move. They stood there another 30 seconds, maybe more, then quietly walked out. I didn't watch them leave. I didn't let myself feel anything about it. Because this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of exactly what they needed, whether they realized it or not. The only question was whether they would show up again tomorrow. The next morning, I opened the restaurant just like I always did, keys jingling in the lock, lights flickering on. The comforting hum of the refrigerator starting up behind me. I didn't think they would actually return. People like Robert, Daniel and Sarah were used to taking shortcuts, used to crying their way out of consequences or charming someone into giving them a pass. But at 6:53 in the morning, 3 silhouettes stood outside my door, waiting in the cold, each of them wearing sneakers and expressions I would never seen before. No confidence, no attitude, just quiet desperation. I unlocked the door without a word, pushed it open, and pointed toward the back. "Timesheets are on the refrigerator," I said. "Aprons are on the hook. You are late." They mumbled apologies, but I didn't respond. No warm welcomes, no hugs. This wasn't a reunion. It was an orientation. Robert was assigned to the dish pit. Daniel got the prep station. Sarah was placed at the register with one of my regular employees to supervise. None of them objected. Not even Robert, though. I saw the way his jaw clenched when he realized he would be elbow-deep in grease and food scraps for the next 8 hours. That first day was a disaster. Robert broke 3 plates and forgot to change the sanitizer water. Daniel cut his finger on the slicer and nearly fainted at the sight of his own blood. Sarah froze when a customer asked her a question about the menu and had to be rescued by one of the college students. I didn't comfort them. I didn't rescue them. I just let them struggle. During the lunch rush, Daniel panicked over missing parsley in the prep containers. And instead of helping, I turned to him and said, "Figure it out." He did. Eventually, he chopped too much, used the wrong knife, but it got done. Robert forgot to refill the soap dispensers, and when the health inspector walked in for a surprise midday check, I let him sweat through the explanation. Sarah got yelled at by a customer after mixing up orders and putting bacon in a vegetarian sandwich. She apologized 4 times, tears in her eyes, but the customer left a 1-star review anyway. After closing, when the last table was wiped and the floor mopped, they hovered around me like children again, waiting for praise. I gave none. "If you want to come back tomorrow," I said, "be here by 6:45. If not, don't waste my time." Then I walked out, leaving them standing there in silence. Day 2, they showed up on time. Day 3, they were early. By the end of the week, Daniel had stopped flinching every time a knife hit the cutting board. Robert stopped muttering under his breath every time I corrected him. And Sarah was finally writing down orders instead of relying on her memory. Customers noticed too. One regular leaned over the counter and said, "They yours?" I nodded. He smiled. "Now I understand why you are the boss." I didn't reply, just handed him his to-go order and turned back to the line. There were still moments, Robert snapping at a coworker, Sarah trying to take an unauthorized break, Daniel zoning out in the walk-in cooler. But I didn't punish them, I reminded them. Firm, clear, professional. I treated them exactly the way I would treat any employee. Not cruel, not soft, honest. They weren't special anymore. They were just staff. The hardest part wasn't making them work. It was watching them realize how far they would fallen. I caught Robert staring at the tip jar one afternoon, like it was a foreign object. I saw Daniel's hands shaking as he tried to finish 10 orders at once. I heard Sarah whispering to herself in the walk-in cooler, repeating the daily specials so she wouldn't mess up again. That night, Dorothy asked me if I thought they would last. I told her, "I don't care if they last. I care if they learn, because this wasn't about rebuilding our relationship. It was about finally teaching them something I never made them learn in the first place. That the world doesn't owe you success just because you share someone's last name." By the second week, the novelty had worn off. The shock of them showing up on time turned into something quieter, something I recognized. Not pride, not even progress, just survival. I watched them sweat through 10-hour shifts without complaint. And for once, they didn't try to explain themselves. No more "I forgot," or "that wasn't clear," or "that is not how we used to do it." They just took the corrections and got back to work. That was the first real sign of change. Robert stopped arguing when he got assigned cleaning duties. He just tied up the trash bags, took them out back, and came in through the kitchen door with grease on his uniform, like everyone else. Daniel, surprisingly, became the one who steadied the others. He started prepping early, checking the walk-in inventory before I even asked, lining up containers like he had been doing it for years. He wasn't fast, not yet, but he was consistent. And consistency gets remembered in kitchens. Sarah still struggled at the front, especially when the line got long or a customer got difficult. But she started writing things down in a notebook during her breaks. Ingredients, allergy warnings, menu shortcuts I would whisper to her without making it obvious. I never praised them. I wasn't cold, just consistent. When Daniel got his first compliment from a customer about the plate presentation, I nodded once and said, "Took you long enough." When Robert handled a broken freezer without whining or asking for help, I passed him a wrench and said, "Don't let it break again." When Sarah correctly upsold a catering order and earned a $60 tip, I handed her the cash and said, "Tips get split, count it." But I saw it in their faces. That small flicker of pride they didn't know how to carry yet. They were learning, not just how to work, but how to show up. The hardest part wasn't the labor. It was the humility. The long, quiet hours where you scrub a grill for the 7th time because grease doesn't care how tired you are. The silence that comes after a customer rolls their eyes at you. The ache in your feet when the dinner rush hits again and you know you have got another 5 hours to go. I would lived in that silence for years. They were just now meeting it for the first time. One afternoon, Sarah asked to stay late. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She wiped tables without being told, helped sweep, and then came to the back, stood in front of me with her hands clasped like a child, and asked, "Do you think I am getting better?" I didn't give her a motivational speech. I just looked at her and said, "Yes, but better's not the goal. Reliable is." She nodded slowly and for once didn't look hurt. She looked like someone who finally understood what that meant. That same night, Daniel offered to do inventory. He didn't even flinch when I corrected 4 of his counts. Robert stayed an hour after close organizing the dry storage, and I didn't find a single misplaced item. These weren't gestures. This wasn't about trying to win me back. This was the floor, doing what the floor always does. It humbles you, resets you, makes you earn every second of dignity. Kitchens don't care about feelings. They care about what you do when the fryer breaks mid-rush, when the dishwasher calls in sick, when the line is out the door and the prep isn't ready. And my children, finally, were starting to understand. They weren't there yet, not fully. But the excuses were gone, the entitlement stripped away. And in its place, something simple and honest was growing. Respect, not for me, not yet, but for the work, for the process, for the silence between being wrong and making it right. And for the first time since they threw me out, I didn't see them as my children anymore. I saw them as workers, flawed, improving, and finally moving in the right direction. It took exactly 1 year from the day I opened Maggie's second chance to the night we locked the doors for a complete renovation. Not because we had to, but because we would earned it. We outgrew the space faster than I expected. Longer lines, more orders, bigger catering contracts. I had enough money in the account to upgrade everything. New equipment, new flooring, walk-in cooler, an actual break room. I wasn't building this for me anymore. I was building it for what came next. By then, Robert had stopped flinching every time I gave an instruction. He managed the line during lunch without falling apart. Daniel handled prep and inventory like a professional. Quiet, but precise. And Sarah had become something I never thought possible. Dependable. She ran the front like it was her responsibility, not her punishment. They weren't perfect, not by a long shot, but they showed up. They worked, and they didn't expect me to applaud every time they did the right thing. That was the real growth, not the skills, not the paychecks, the silence. The fact that they could finally hold the weight of responsibility without crumbling under it or demanding recognition. I never made a speech about it. I just let them keep punching in. And when it came time to close down for the renovation, I handed each of them a folder. Clean paperwork, real contracts, ownership shares in the business. Robert stared at his. "You are serious?" he asked. "You are giving us ownership?" I nodded. "I am not giving it. You have earned it, but I am still majority owner." Don't get cocky. Daniel looked like he was going to cry. Sarah just sat down in one of the dining chairs, folder in her lap, speechless for once. I told them there were conditions. No power plays, no titles beyond your station. And if anyone missed 2 shifts without notice, they were out permanently. They all agreed without hesitation. That was the moment I knew this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was legacy. I didn't want to die with the restaurant in my hands. I wanted to see them carry it while I was still around to guide them. So when we reopened a month later with new floors, new signage, a bigger kitchen, and a framed photo of me and the original Henderson's home cooking staff on the wall, it felt less like a comeback and more like a reset. We kept the same name, Maggie's Second Chance, not out of ego, but because it meant something now. Second chances aren't about rising once. They are about getting up every time you are knocked down and choosing to rise differently. The grand reopening was packed. Former customers, new faces, a local councilman who ordered dessert. At the end of the night, after the last plate was cleared and the floors were mopped, my children stood in the kitchen waiting for my signal to leave. Instead, I handed Sarah the keys. "You are closing tonight," I said. "And tomorrow, we start on time." She nodded, without looking scared. That is how I knew she was ready. As I walked home that night, yes, home. Because Dorothy and I had finally found a small house near the lake, I thought about how strange it felt not to be angry anymore. The pain was still there, quiet, like an old scar. But it didn't control me. I wasn't chasing respect. I had it. I wasn't fighting for control. I would earned it, and I wasn't afraid of what came next. I would face worse. I would build better. That night, I sat with my tea, feet up, watching a video Sarah had posted to our restaurant's page. Just a time-lapse of the dinner rush, Robert flipping burgers, Daniel plating sides, and me in the background laughing at something. A customer said, the caption read, "She built it." "We are just catching up, and for the first time since they kicked me out of my own home, I cried. Not because I was broken, but because finally I wasn't. What is the most important lesson about resilience you have learned from your own family? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring stories about turning life's biggest challenges into your greatest comebacks.